couple months back before COVID when we were down in Dallas at the Data Connectors event. That's where we started building this relationship. And we do a lot of work with a lot of the different ISSAs. The Houston chapter is one I've done quite a bit of work with. And today we're going to talk about training. And if you're at the Data Connectors, I'm sorry, this presentation looks a lot like the one I presented there. And quick question, Bill, are you going to do slides for me or am I going to share?
No, you go ahead and share.
Okay, then let me
you should be able to.
Yep, I certainly can. Let me bring my deck up and go to full screen. And can you see that okay, Bill?
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So again, I'm Will Monroe. I run marketing over at Rangeforce. You probably have not heard of Rangeforce. It's a relatively new company. We've only been around for a few years. We're still a venture-funded company. And we're in a new market or maybe a new spin on an old market, which is the training market. And we'll talk a lot about this, but the bottom line of this story is we need to do a better job training all of you. And we need to provide better tools to train all of you. We forget how difficult the job is. And I can speak from the vendor side. I've worked at 6 different cybersecurity companies over the years, running product management and product marketing and ultimately marketing. And, everything from identity and access management to operational risk management to even a company in the AI space. And every day, vendors come out and they will demo a product for you and it will look fantastic. And when we run those products in our labs and we build them and we go through QA, they look fantastic. But we all know that when you put that lab out in an operational environment, that product out in an operational environment, it never quite tends to reach the level of fantastic that you saw in the demo. The Gartner number on that is about 26 or 27% effectiveness versus what it should be doing. And a lot of that is how you operationalize that product in your environment and how you train on it. And if you go through most of the vendor training, especially the newer products, they tend to be really poor. And if you look at vendor training on some of the larger products, they tend to be very expensive and not that much better. So this is a new market. You'll hear it called simulation-based training. You'll hear it called cyber ranges. We'll talk about all of that. But the real goal here is putting the tools in front of cybersecurity professionals, IT professionals, DevOps professionals, AppSec professionals, and giving them tools that allow them to actually train effectively to learn how to operate the systems they have and go beyond that to be really effective cyber pros. And that's what we're going to spend our time talking about today. The proof on what I'm talking about comes right here. I started in this industry back in 2002 in the origins of the identity and access management market. And back then in North America, we were spending about $3.5 billion a year as an economy on security products. That's a pretty big number. Today, that number is 66 billion for North America. That's an amazing growth path. The problem is the other 2 graphs. The other 2 graphs show you the adversary's success roughly over that same period of time. And the slopes of those graphs are all maybe a little steeper than what we'd like. And they're not slowing down. And for a lot of time, we have been spending a lot of money deploying the next great technology. And I mean, you can go down the list, right? SIM was going to change everything. EDR was going to change everything. SOAR, was going to change everything. Now it's AI. And while we've been focused on that technology piece, we've, I think, forgotten something very core to the success of any technology you're going to deploy, and that's people and process. And we all probably have security awareness training for our end users, and we all probably spend more time and effort training those end users to not click on a bad email than we train our own security people to be really good and qualified at their jobs. Now, I know there's a lot of training out there, but it's not training you necessarily control. It's not training that necessarily aligns to what you need people to learn. It doesn't allow you to create paths of training for your individuals that match your environment. And oftentimes you don't have any visibility to how your people did when you send them to that training. They have a cert, but you don't know really what their skills are. So the notion of this new training market, this simulation-based training market, is to bring these tools to the security team inside a company and to allow them to get more out of the investment in their technology, but more importantly, allow them to learn how to work beyond the technology, which we'll talk about, and allow them to work better as a team. When you think about a cyber attack, if you've ever been through a real one, they happen very quickly. It's very hard to get out in front of them. And very few times has your SOC team and your forensic team and your threat intel team and your security control environment, you know, the team that owns security controls and your IT team, have they actually worked together in a fast-paced situation where they've got to share data. And the data they share is really important. And oftentimes that's not defined in a playbook. If you have SOAR, oftentimes it's not defined at all in any of the processes you're using. So we need to take a lesson from the military here. And the reason for that is the military works in an operational environment. What I mean by operational is when you're flying an airplane, when you're doing an operation, when you're landing on a beach, when you're doing a reconnaissance, when you're driving a ship, you are in a moving process that entire time. A business is an operation, buying, selling, supply chain. And when a cyber attack hits that business, it hits in an operational environment. And we don't train in operational environments. When I was going through flight school, one of the squadron mottos that I always liked was train like you fight, fight like you train. And that motto makes a ton of sense when you think that if I can create an environment where I can train how I want a team to operate, what I want to happen across 15 or 20 different potential scenarios, brief up a mission, debrief a mission, do all those pieces, and then practice it in an operational simulation environment, then I can actually fight like I train. And if you stick to your training and your doctrine, especially in the world of things like flying missions in an aircraft, which I'm familiar with, it works amazingly effective. One of the things that happens during a cyber attack, which happens when you're in military missions, is things start to move rapidly. Things can become scary. And if you don't have the steps you need to do, the responsibilities you have, the decisions you need to make in muscle memory, you're very easily likely to freeze, to forget, to do a bad behavior. I equate this to, I don't think anyone on this call would get on an airline where the airline advertised, we don't use simulation training for emergency procedures like an engine out. We just give the guys a book, and then when it happens, we hope for the best. But in reality, that's what we do today in the cyber world. And that's really not the right way to train our people. Now, the change started happening 4 or 5 years ago. And again, the military led the way. On the bottom right is the NATO cyber range, which is a cyber range that in all places is in Tallinn, Estonia. And they built this thing back after both Georgia and Tallinn, Estonia took terrible hits from the Russians in cyber attacks. And NATO realized any sort of attack that's going to come into their area from the Russians is going to start with a major cyber attack on their critical infrastructure, on their command and control, on the things that are going to make it very hard for them to defend their war space, right? The land and the air and the sea against that invading Russian army. Hopefully that never, ever happens. But they're going to be prepared for it. And so they built an amazing range where they recreate entire cities, they recreate entire military commands, they recreate the tanks and the ships, right down to the infantry squadrons and the communication gear, and then they attack them. And you can see people with different shirts on, they're playing different roles as they go through these attacks and learn what's likely to happen based on what we see from Russia and how to defend against them. It's a fascinating exercise to watch. My company, Rangeforce, came into existence because of that cyber range. Our founders helped build it. And the lessons we learn from it are what we bring into our product. So it's a very interesting model in that it gives people operational experience, hands-on, what it feels like, what it's likely to look like, and how to defend against it. And if you think about the world we all operate in cybersecurity, there are a few very specialized, what they call APT attacks, but the majority of attacks are repeating attack methodologies and strategies that we've all seen before. And so you can train up against them if you can recreate those environments in simulation and train people how to deal with them. So we're going to dig in on that idea from this point. And I want to drive home the operational training example, right? It's pretty simple. I think everyone knows what the correct answer is, C. But think about the training we all do today, right? We go to, how do we spend our money? We go to Black Hat, which is going to be virtual this year, so we'll see what that's like. Or we go to RSA, and we take part in some of the training that goes on there, and we get CPE credits for those that help us keep our certifications up there. We can do online CBT training, which are oftentimes lectures, classroom lectures. My kids are in college. They're all struggling through this right now. They can't stand it. They actually miss being in classrooms. And then we can go to dedicated training classes, like on the bottom right, stuff that SANS and OWASP does, which are great classes. But the problem with all three of those is once that class is over, you don't have anywhere to go back and practice what you learned. As a matter of fact, while the learning goes on, in most cases, you're not practicing well, you're actually learning. You're not doing it hands-on. And those pieces are missing. The gents on the bottom left look like they're having a lot of fun, and that looks like a fun range to try. But they're actually learning muscle memory of how to use a weapon against different types of targets, what ammunition to use at different weapons, all very important operational decisions that they might have to make in the field when artillery is coming down on them, when there's fire all around them, and they can't stop and think. They can't look at a manual. They can't run through a process book. And so this type of simulation training is very powerful in getting people to build that muscle memory and giving them places to go practice till they get it right. Just like a flight simulator, a different type. You know, in the modern medical world now, they have brought for advanced operations, simulations of those operations. So they have simulators at hospitals like the lead hospital in Dallas, name forgets me, or Mass General here, where the doctor goes in and he practices that operation before he actually does it. Brain surgery, heart surgery, this is becoming very common. And I don't know about you, but I'd feel really confident if I knew that right before the operation, the doctor tried it out and made sure he knew everything he was doing, and they ran through things going wrong and he was prepared before he went in there. So to wrap up the problem, right? What's going on and what the issues are in the market, right? Well, we know we have a big gap in talent. And part of this we created. Part of this we created because we haven't brought the same amount of energy to the training technology that we get in other industries. We don't train like engineers train when they're going through college, a cybersecurity program. As a matter of fact, I'm sure all of you experienced new people, young people coming out of cybersecurity training, certificate academies, or even colleges, and they lack a lot of skills when they come into the world. And you have to spend a lot of time giving them on-the-job training to do that. Now, the good news is colleges are just as excited about this training as I hope all of you will be. And we are starting to see pickup in there. We do a lot of work with Cal Polytech and with Purdue University and University of Alabama, Birmingham, 3 or 4 different schools, and 3 or 4 schools over in Europe also, where we do specific assessments of the students and we run team exercises, both individual and team exercises with them. And I'll talk a little bit about that. If we could up the investment in training and the technology and capabilities of our training, I think we do a lot in taking that job gap that we see out there. And let's remember, there's a lot of people trained in security who just can't fill the role you're looking for. So the gap, I think, is somewhat overstated. I think it's overstated in that there are people with a lot of experience, but they don't have the right experience for your job. And there are people out there that have maybe priced themselves out of the market by being so very talented and working in companies that you might hire to consult after an incident where the pay is amazingly high. And this type of training gives the ability to train up new people quickly, to assess talent coming in, and I'll dig into these in some detail, and to even take people who are specialists in one area and cross-train them in another. The base problem, as I spoke about at the very beginning, is we have cyber ranges out there. Some of you may have actually done exercises in them, but most of them are hardware-based, in-person, and not scalable. And they're also very expensive. And we have a lot of CBT-based e-learning. It's very scalable, but it's not hands-on. And so that gap is what we need to fill. So what does a solution look like that's going to fit that gap? And I will speak to it again in the end, but I wrote a market guide paper, which is basically this slideshow turned into a white paper. And it talks about what the problem is, what are the capabilities of a technology if you're looking to do this type of training that they should have, and how to implement that training. And that's basically what we're going to walk through here. So when we talk about this type of technology, we're looking at its base at something that could create simulations of real environments and real attacks and real vulnerabilities. And we need this to be browser-based. One reason, because we're all working from home. But even when we aren't working from home, think about the person on your security team and the time they have to actually train. It's painful to send them out of class for a day, let alone 5 days. It's much easier to give them an hour a day over 5 days, getting 5 full hours of training. And to do that on a browser, sitting in the office, or even sitting at home. And so bringing technology into play that's cloud-based, that allows the creation of simulation, and it's browser-based, so it can be accessed anywhere at any time, right? Training also that reflects the environments that we deal with, the attacks that are out there, and the vulnerabilities that are out there. So looking at the content, we'll talk a little bit more about the types of content you're going to find in this market. These are not going to be human interaction training technologies. Human interaction training technologies tend to run into scalability issues. I'll give you an example. A class, we won't name the vendor, and I had a customer signing up for it. He wanted 3 people in it. When they signed up, they needed 12 people total. They had 8. They canceled it. They scheduled it for 4 weeks further out. 2 of his 3 people couldn't attend it anymore. That's not going to be a consistent way to train your team. So relying on a human teacher is often impossible. But we can bring technology in play to assist in that training. And I'll show you some very simple examples of what I mean there. But this is where we're going to see a lot of progress, because in other industries, they've adopted virtual assistant technology. Even think of your Echo or Alexa and how it can listen to you and provide feedback. You can bring machine learning into this environment and see users working through a set of problems. When you see them having trouble, you can give them hints. I'll show you what that looks like. You can help them. You can give them guidance. So there's a lot of ways where we can use machines to interact with the student to help the student along to master a complex subject. We see a lot of people who are very good in some areas really need to go back and start as a beginner in other areas. And I'll give you some examples of that. And so you need to have that step-by-step process. Gamification. How do we make learning as fun as playing Fortnite, right? Now, it's never going to be quite that fun, but you can bring in things like quick problem-based scenarios. You can bring in ideas like challenges that they have to go. You can bring ideas like giving them points and for winning things, leaderboards. There's all sorts of stuff you can do here. This is another area where you're going to see really cool new technology be brought in as more of the gaming industry is brought into the training industry, which is happening in a lot of areas, and we're seeing it in this area too. And as I talked about, this training needs to go from the very first level up to very advanced training. And that's maybe one of the toughest things to build this training, is that you need to make sure that, let's say Yara rules, for example, you need to make sure that you've got a basic class that teaches how to build, how to install Yara, how to build a base rule, all the way up to very advanced rule writing based on threat intelligence you're getting out of, say, a recorded future product. The last piece is the most important, because this is the piece that's missing completely in the world we live in today, and that's measurability. You don't have, I don't have, we don't have a way to assess the real skills of the people within our security departments. We don't have a way to really assess the people coming in that we're hiring. And so being able to give people exercises to walk through and see how they do and get a report on that is huge in understanding the strengths and weaknesses of your team, what type of training you should be focusing on, and where you have gaps that you may need to hire against or buy technology against. And so a big part of this is not just teaching, but also giving a team lead, a CISO, a security manager, the ability to manage a team of people and see how skilled they are. So there's two types of training that I want you to understand in these markets. And some vendors do both, some do one, some do others. You're going to see a lot of difference here. And that's why it's important to understand. One side of this is self-paced simulation training. It's all about individual training where people, in almost all cases, people will fire a virtual machine up out of the cloud. That virtual machine will have the environment you want to train in. I'll show you a picture of what this looks like. And it will have the lesson plan, and it will have the feedback and the skills training all built into one, right? And you'll see things around security operations, incident response, DevOps in these classes. And this is all about having them to be able to go in and do that training and then be able to go in and re-practice it, right? So as you're looking at this technology, that's always an important question. Okay, they finished something. Can they go back and do it again? Can they do it 10 times? Is there a charge for that? So understanding what that individual training looks like, what classes it covers, are there assessments built into it, and can they do it over and over? The other side of it is red team and blue team exercises, which we hear a lot about. The very popular thing you find out there is red team exercises like capture the flags. I take a bunch of individuals, I create a goal of getting a piece of code or setting a piece of malware. I create barriers to doing that across breaking through firewalls and servers. And then I'm going to see who does it the fastest and have a leaderboard who does it. Now that's great training. It's really great training for pen testers. But for my SOC team, blue exercises are equally, if not more important. How do I learn to defend? And there's two types of cyber range exercises out there. There's individual exercises and there's team exercises. And the team exercises are relatively new. It's a little more difficult to do, but from my experience, it's really the most important thing you can do for your team, because this not only gives them what a cyber attack feels like, but it gives them the ability to work together to defend against that attack and communicate and learn process and all those things we talked about at the beginning. So understanding when you're going to go do a cyber range exercise, understand, is it red team, is it blue team, is it a mix of both, purple team? And that's fine, that's great. Understand, is this individual-based learning or is it team-based learning? And if it's team-based learning, are they working together in a common environment? Is someone operating the SIM? Is someone operating the endpoint detection tool? Is someone working the network systems? And can they share data like you would have to in real life? Because that's the best kind of training you can get. Now, before COVID-19, there were a lot of really good on-site blue team cyber ranges. IBM has one of the best. It's a big truck they drive around. It's a bit expensive, but it's really cool training. I took part in one of them. The problem is with COVID-19, now you have to look for this online, and it gets really hard. And I'll tell you, just from our example, we do our blue team training, the team part of it, on site with the customer. And we are now having to rebuild that entire back end so it can work virtually, because you have the problem of you want to coordinate the activities in the system in the range and coordinate the communications so that people are getting a real feel for it's SOC, but I'm working from home. And that's hard. So that's something that hopefully over the next 3 to 6 months, you'll see come out. I think in the end, COVID-19 will help us there because it's going to force the vendors down this path. And that's really good training that will be available for everyone that's out there. So then what types of coverage will you see? These are the most common. You're going to see vendors who have SOC and incident response, right? And these are going to be technologies that have, or simulations that have attacks in them. They'll have, this is a very common one, and this is one that's great training. I've got a vulnerable app. So we see, you go out and you say, yeah, boy, I have that problem in my environment. Okay, I'm gonna put that vulnerable app in a simulator. I'm gonna teach my team how to attack it. And I'm gonna teach them how the threats that are gonna come in will exploit it. And then I'm gonna teach my team how to defend against it. And that's really great training. That's one of the things you want to see in there, because as we know, a lot of the CVE-based vulnerability attacks take up a lot of the stuff we're going to have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Another thing that's important, when you're looking at the security side of it, make sure that the vendors have brought in some of the outside frameworks into the training. So it may be MITRE ATT&CK, it may be NIST or it may be NIST CFS. Those are three common ones. But it's very good to have some benchmarks that get standards. My preference is NIST because I think that lines up best with the security world we have. MITRE gets a little bit tangential in some of their training. It's just an opinion. But make sure those are there and you can measure against those. And then you're looking for learning paths that aren't subject related like what you might get at a SANS course. You're looking for learning paths that are role-based, that are going to look like your tier 1 analyst, your tier 2 analyst, maybe your forensic team, threat hunter, whatever they may be. And the vendors should have a way to at least match up their training to those roles you're looking for. An important part of training that's slightly peripheral to what we all do, but it's really important, is the web application security DevOps side. And I'll tell you a good story. We have one customer over in Europe, and he's put in play an OWASP 10 module. And it's actually about 35 hours of training. And he has his DevOps team go through it. And he said, I can tell the people that learn from it because my pen testing bill at the end of the month is 90% cheaper than my folks that didn't go through it, and they make all those core mistakes. So part of making this training very interactive and interesting is building it out broader in the company and actually creating a culture of security that gets outside of just security. And fun, gamified training and competitions and cyber range exercises can help do that. And so we've seen success there. And then another area that we're seeing technology out now is on the ISSA SCADA side. And this is really important because there's very little training for these folks. And you can do really cool simulations of any sort of system and then attack it and do back-end exercises. So if this is an area you're in, there's now new tech there, and it's really good simulation-based training. You can see in the screenshot, that's a full environment, and you actually see things start breaking and valves going as it gets attacked. And it's actually quite fun and stressful when you're in it. And what do I mean by one of these learner interfaces, right? So you're going to come into an interface, and in the top left, you're going to have, what you're seeing there is that's the lesson plan, right? So in this lesson plan, you're going to ultimately end up doing a Suricata search and a malicious packet drop, right? But it's going to give you steps to build along the way, and you're going to see success as you go. And as you do that, you're going to have, in this case, you've got a website front end, which has got a point of sale system in it. And then you've got an Ubuntu server, and you're going to be working on that back end to affect things on that website to fill out that lesson plan. And so with each of the steps of the lesson plan, you're going to be coding. You're going to be firing off security tools. You're going to be scanning, and you're going to have to complete that and enter it in the answers to go through and progress forward. And that's what I mean by this real hands-on simulation that you're going to get. Here's another cool thing you can do with this type of training. You've always had your hands tied to certificates that other companies create, other companies that you pay money to, by the way. In this world, you can start to put together paths, career paths, learning paths for your own teams. This is a real one. It's from one of our customers, a very large tech company out in the West Coast. I won't name it. And this is their idea of what they want their people to learn to become SOC 1 qualified for them. And the yellow are tests. Those are actually assessments. An assessment is that simulation environment where it tells you a problem and you've got to solve it, and there's no hints, no lesson plan. You've got to take what you've learned and you've got to go through and complete those challenges. And so you can see SOC 1 and SOC 2 here. You can see, these vary based on the type of systems you have deployed. This is a mixed Linux and Windows environment, so they've got a little of that. They're very deep users of Yara, so you see that earlier on, which is interesting because usually we see that later on in training. But you now can build these type of lessons plans, and the interfaces of the products should be able to help you do that, and then actually create career paths and training paths for your team. And it's not just SOC, right? You should be able to do this for threat hunters. You should be able to do it for, well, the one customer I talked about that has one of these for his dev folks for OWASP 10. And they get an OWASP 10 cert, and they get, you know, publicity in the company newsletter that they've achieved this. And he actually lets them, if they get the cert, they actually get to take part in the cyber range exercises, which is kind of the benefit of doing it. And then, you know, what are examples outside of security or of those two SOCs that you'll see types of training on? You know, you can see in purple, that's more web app, or, you know, web application security. I'm tongue tied, or application security. You can see the DevOps type where it gets into, you get into Docker type environments, and you get into different types of user management and those pieces. And then you can see on the ICS side on the far right, these are the types of trainings that these modules are going to be. What's important about this is each one of these should be less than an hour. So the other piece about this training is we know human beings learn in a specific period of time really well and then start to fade real fast. And it's actually about 30, 35 minutes. And so the shorter, more compact you can make the lesson from beginning to end, the more they're going to retain it. And if they don't retain it, the easier it is to go back and do that. And so the reason you see so many of them is each one of these are only going to run for 35 to 1 hour, depending on the complexity of them. And that means the user can move through it fairly quickly. They won't get bogged down, and they can move to the next step and the next step. It also gives you a great way when you're measuring it, how they do in that movement. Someone can move very quickly. You know they're very competent, right? Someone who understands, you know, NoSQL mapping, and there are 4 or 5 classes on there, just whips through it. You know that's a skill set you have. And so that's why you'll see in all of the vendors, the modules are broken up into very small chunks, and that's important. When you go into the UI of one of these, what you want is something that's very manageable, because what you're going to have is hundreds of modules. We have 200 and something modules out there. I think the biggest competitor is close to 400. Now, some of those are just videos. Some of those are hands-on training. But you want an easy way to be able to go in and create teams, assign members, and then put those modules in, because long lists make it impossible, and you do not have the time to waste on doing that. A really good vendor will be able to preset these up for you. And so you can say, hey, let's go through the modules and build learning paths as part of the buying process. They'll build those in, and then you turn it on, and they're all there built. You just assign your players, your team members to the teams, and you assign the learning path, and boom, you're done. So that's real important. For the user, it needs to be real simple, right? So here's the user coming in for the SOC Analyst 1. They're going to click on the class. They're going to open up and see the details of it. They're going to click the blue button, and boom, it starts. Right? And when it starts, just as we showed, it's going to fire up into a training environment. Now, here's some of the things you want to look for in that training environment. You want to make sure that each of the lesson plans has these bite-sized steps that the user can operate through and show progression. You want to make sure that the environment is complete with the different technologies they're going to need to use, the environment they're going to work in, you know, and all of the lesson plans, which actually we'll see here in the materials tab. This is a detailed of everything about Yara they need to learn. There's even, you know, you want to make sure they have some feedback. So the student's telling them how the class worked and what it was. And then ultimately, as they go through the lessons, you want to make sure they're assisted. So in this case, I've fired up some of the hints to help the student through. So if the student has problems, these hint buttons are going to come up, and the student can click on them. You know, if we see them hanging as they're going through the training, and they can click on them, and it'll give them ways to move along and keep learning. Now, when you see reports on the back end, you're going to see scores based on how many hints that user used and how much time they took. So you're going to understand who's stronger and who's weaker, and who should probably go back and repeat the class. And then finally, as they go through, they need that environment, right? They're going to go actually into the range, the virtual environment. They're going to load Yara up. That's all I've done here when I took the screenshot. And then they're going to go through and create the rules. And each step of the way, you're going to see the check marks. And that's the way you want to see the training work in the environments. Everyone's got a very similar, slightly different layouts, but make sure it's broken into pieces. Make sure there's clear step-by-step instructions. Make sure there's the ability to support the student with hints. make sure all the materials are there so that the student, if they have to learn and research, can quickly get to them. And then you want to see how they did, right? You want to be able to tell within each of the skills that you're having them train on exactly how strong they are, what they've accomplished, what you've assigned them, what they've completed, what they haven't completed. And that's going to give you the ability to go in and understand who's strong, who's weak, who needs more work. And then finally, good vendors should be able to roll these up into some interesting reports for you as a security leader to share outside of the team on your successes, on what you've accomplished. And there's some cool things that vendors can do, right? One of them is we can benchmark against those standards. Another one is if the vendor's got a lot of customers and this is a cloud environment and they're collecting all this data and anonymizing it, they can benchmark you against your peers. I didn't show it here, but we have a cool spider diagram that says, here's the NIST framework. Here's 5 of our customers that look just like you. Here's where you are. And so it's a great way to understand how you're doing in the market. These can be very customized, but it does give you the ability for the first time to not show how your technology is doing, but how your people and your team is doing. And that's really powerful because we've not had that before. As I talked about, make sure you can match the training to the attacks and the vulnerabilities and the threats you care about. So as you go through and do your due diligence, if you're looking into this type of training, go through and figure out what is important to you in your industry. What are your threat intelligence feeds telling you? What do you want to make sure the basic skills that people have, right? Here's just a simple example, right? Back in 2017, a giant breach, right? This breach was a web application at the vendor site with a vulnerability that was exploited. The person was able to get back into the back end, steal credentials, move around, pull out a lot of information about the customers, right? Left some persistent backdoors that allowed them to reattack and extract a huge amount of data. Now, you should be able to go through and say, okay, I'm worried about that. What are the modules? And then here's just a sample, right? If these training modules in each of these areas have been completed and the challenge is completed, then it was very unlikely this attack and the vulnerability would have been out in the first place. And if it had been detected, it's very likely your team would have been able to contain it very quickly and not have that large loss. Certainly close the back doors down and not have the secondary loss. So you should be able to get to that level of granularity when you're going through this process. Kind of wrapping up, how do people use these technologies, right? Where are the values in them? Well, the notion of having your own continuous training program, as we've talked about, is really valuable, right? Something that allows you to have these career paths, that allows you to benchmark against standards, that allows you to visualize your team's strengths and weaknesses, and then keep that training going, keep that practice going. That's important. There's the going across the top. There's the ability to deal with specific vulnerabilities that are common to your environment or threats common to your environment, to create simulations or to have them already in place that match up to where you need your people to train to make sure you're improving your security hygiene across all of your different groups and to expand it out. Practice, right? This gets to the flight simulator piece. You want to practice. We have customers, they will run large blue team exercises twice a year. Every one of them is different each time. They bring in new variations on them. They may bring in their latest environments. They may bring in something that's completely out of left field to really mess the people up and make sure what they have. But environments where both individuals and teams can practice. An interesting use case that we see more and more of is assessing candidate skills. So all of these vendors should be able to give you a license that gives you the ability to have 50 candidates go in and just do an assessment and score it. So you have 5 candidates, they all have their CISSP, they all have the different, resume goals you have. Put them in an assessment, tell them to take an hour, do this assessment, and you're going to get those scorecards and be able to say, this person knows what they're doing, these guys not so much, let's not hire them. That's a nice objective way to understand who's going to fit in your environment. There's also little innuendos in that, in the sense that you might have one candidate who gets that and an hour later they're done. They may not have done great, but they're done. And then you may have another candidate who 3 days later turns it in. They did great, but it's telling how quickly one candidate did, how slow the other did, or how long it took them. And so you can learn a lot from doing assessments. We see a lot of cross-training in our customer base. And this is a way that our customers are taking people out of other areas of the company, DevOps and IT primarily, and moving them over to security and cross-training and upskilling them because they can't hire the right person. And we have some customers who are in locations where they don't want to hire remote, and it's going to be very hard. So they've got to be able to upskill their people. I will also make a real argument for cross-training because we see this a lot. You'll have one person who's really, really good at, say, threat hunting or forensics, something a little deeper. And when things go wrong, that individual gets overloaded very quickly. And if you don't have some backup to help them, we see that as single points of failure. So think about, as you build training programs, how do you cross-train 3 or 4 people in each area so that when things go south, you're prepared for that? And the final piece of this is it's surprisingly inexpensive. We all know how expensive a SANS class is. Most of these technologies are about 1/3 of that. That's 1/3 of the cost of one SANS class for an entire year of training for a person across all 180 or 250 modules, whatever it may be. It's a really good deal. And what we see customers do is this doesn't compete with the SANS training. They still want people to do that. A use case we commonly see is they go to the SANS training, they come back, they give them an assessment or 2 on what they're supposed to learn, which can be very telling and also very motivating to people who go to SANS training if you tell them you're going to do that beforehand. And then you bring them back and you use this as ongoing training. And so you take, if you're sending 5 people to SANS, cut a couple of those and make it repeated training, right? Or if you're sending 8 people to Black Hat. Also, there's no travel costs. And maybe the most important thing is by the time we get into the fall, the notion of renting or building a cyber range should be out of the market, right? You should be able to have online cyber ranges you can jump into that are included in training classes or a small fee, not $50,000 over, but maybe it's $5,000 or $10,000 to create a custom environment, and that's it. And that's really important. And then you're going to bring your training costs down, be able to train more people with the budget you have, and be more effective. So that's what I wanted to run through. Let me talk a little bit about my company. As we talked about, we started back in 2015, fairly new. We did help build that NATO cyber range. That's where the idea of building a cloud-based cyber range came from. And then very quickly we learned we needed the training because a cloud-based cyber range without an instructor and lessons is like putting that pilot who doesn't know how to do a single out engine into a simulator with no instructor, and he keeps crashing then too. So you need the instructor and the range because they work hand in hand. We work with a lot of very large companies. We actually have some interesting deployments. For example, Tech Data is a customer. We're also in their cyber range down in Phoenix. And if you are a Tech Data partner, they're our main distributor. So reach out to me on that. But we work with companies across all different verticals. We don't find that there's a single vertical that's adopting this faster. We go from universities all the way to large tech, all the way to bank, all the way to consulting companies because they need to get people trained up and billable very quickly. So for all of you, the things to think about, right? How are you going to train your team when they're in place? And how can you train them with really engaging content? That's why it's worth looking at this environment and these technologies. They give you a safe place to go practice with real malware, real vulnerabilities, not in your environment, but an environment that looks a lot like or just like yours, right? It reinforces learning in team environments. You're hands-on, you're working together, you're getting away from that lecture environment, which we know has not been particularly effective. The learning paths give you amazingly powerful tools to create career paths, to create cross-training paths, to make sure you have, no single points of failure in your staff. You can build programs based on benchmarks out there and then show that as a standard to the organization. But most importantly, it allows you to measure, it allows you to assess, and allows you to improve, repeat, and improve. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Let me put some final comments in, and then I'll turn it back to Bill, and we'll do our questions. If you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me. My contact information is right there. I'm happy if you fire me off an email to send you that market guide, because that's basically everything we talked about in a written form, in a checklist form. We are going to do a drawing. I appreciate everything you guys do and the work you do. So we always do a $100 gift card. I let the team pick who's going to win. And when you win and you're announced, you'll just fire me off an email and let me know if you're interested in Amex or Amazon. And finally, we're growing. So, you know, COVID-19 has been a terrible thing. My children in college hate it. I know lots of people who have lost their jobs, and it's terrible. Strangely enough, in the world of online training, it's doubled our business, and we can't keep up. So we're hiring. We need really good customer or field security engineers that can go out and work with our customers to understand these products and deploy these products. We're looking for business development people because we're developing new territories. We do a lot of research. As you can imagine, because we build malware, or we get malware from our partners, and we take vulnerabilities that are out there and we bring those together and we write these training scenarios and we write these exercises so they're pre-built. We need a lot of researchers and research analysts. We have teams here in the US. We work remotely in that environment. And we also have teams over in Estonia, because they're really on the front lines of all this. And then we're building out that DevSecOps side. That's a big part of expansion right now. So anyone interested in getting in that side of the house. So I thank you all very much. I hope that was interesting and entertaining. And let's open it up to questions.
Well, thanks very much, Will. That was a fantastic presentation. I think it really covered what makes training meaningful and effective. And there's a few questions here. And as I'm talking here, if the membership has any other questions that you have for Will, we've got a few requests for additional information, but if you have some questions about the content, I'm happy to read those too. One thing that I was thinking as I was listening—
Sean, can you go ahead and read that question there from Raymond King?
I'm sorry, Carrie?
There's a question here from Raymond King. Will, do you have any metrics of how many internal resources are required to manage and administer the training environment for an organization based on complexity or size? Making the case to management is usually one of the biggest barriers to moving forward with getting funding and resources for training.
Sure, that's a great question, and it absolutely is. And it's not just the funding, it's the time, right? And a new headcount. If you've got a security awareness training group, we find that it fits in with that group very, very easily. For folks in larger organizations, they usually have those people and they can pick this up. It's very, as I said, we try to make it as fire and forget as we can. We build the learning paths with you. You can take the ones we've already built if you like those, because we do those with a lot of our customers. And you just put them in and then watch people complete. And then we come out every 6 months and sit and go through everything that's gone on. We build executive reports for you to use around the organization. We also build the type of exercises and continue training. So we pick up a lot of that. It's a SaaS product. We include the service in it, and we try to help with that side. The hardest thing is just simply putting the people in and putting the teams in, and that's pretty simple. It's just a question of having the people log in themselves and then you clicking them in. So on a large organization, it may take 1 FTE. On small companies, and we have a lot of customers that are surprisingly small, they just run it internally and let us help them do it. And they don't apply anyone full-time to it. So it varies from 0 to 1. I don't know of anyone, and I think our largest deployment's about 400 users, and they've got 1 FTE running it.
Okay, we had an additional question. It says, can you comment on your customer base? Do you see interest primarily from larger enterprises, or is it spread equally to the mid-size and smaller companies?
So fascinatingly, it's everything. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Because we have training that goes from beginner all the way through to very advanced, we'll get a very small company in, say, the medical industry, right? A medical device company that's building a very specialized device. They'll buy 2 licenses. And that's it. And they're used by their IT people to learn how to do the security stuff that they're supposed to be doing and aren't staffed for. So we do see it with very small folks. Mid-market folks enjoy it too for that same reason, right? A lot of people buy it simply to get their people up to speed quickly and do the assessments. And then large organizations, like I said, you know, we have You know, we have lots of companies. The sweet spot is 30 people in security, 20 people in security, and then they'll spread it out to another 20 or 30 in their DevOps teams. And so we see all those sizes.
Thank you. Sean, go ahead with your questions, please.
I just have one more question, Will. So when it comes to technical content, like YARA rules, really useful. Sigma is kind of an up and coming thing too. I know there's a lot of interest in moving to other kinds of technologies that can be applied in other ways. So there's a lot of interesting offensive and defensive tools being developed all the time. How do you focus on how to engage learners, how to figure out how you're going to enhance your training with the next great thing that's coming?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is one of the biggest challenges. It's funny as this space evolves. The first thing that came out was the content race. Content being what are the lesson plans and the tools that are going to be in the simulations. And we started by using a lot of open source tools, Nmap, Suricata, YARA. Now we're starting to bring in vendor tools. You'll see Splunk very soon, Recorded Futures in there, Carbon Black, because people want to be able to train in the environments and in their stacks. As far as the latest and the greatest, a lot of that we get back from talking to the customers. So we have a security research team here in the US. We have another over in Estonia. The Estonians' job is specifically to look at the latest attacks that are coming and to figure out what those attacks would look like in a simulation environment and build them in. So they're really advanced in the security side. The US folks are very focused on vulnerabilities and tools and bringing those sides out. And we then sit with the customers. You notice there was a feedback button. That's actually a Slack channel in our company. Every one time someone takes a class, we see it. Every time they have feedback on it, it pops up. And people will say, this is great, but you need to add this, this, and this. And we go through and prioritize those with the customers and build it out.
Thanks.
An additional question online. When do you see the cyber skills gap closing? Is it big now? And it seems to be getting bigger.
That's a big question. So I don't think it closes fast. Let's just focus on North America. You know, the fancy marketing number I threw up there, that's global. And when you look into other countries, the percentage is much worse than it is here in North America. In North America, it's going to be a generational thing, right? And it's the work you guys are doing, and we do similar work where you're going out to schools and you're getting people interested in this and interested in cybersecurity as a career, because the majority of people don't think about it or don't understand what it is and don't visualize themselves doing it. And yet anyone can. And I think the schools need to do a better job of graduating students that can actually come into the market and be valuable. We're working, as I said, with a lot of schools. We also work with a lot of community organizations like Power Up and NPower and some of the others, where we put a lot of this training into their environments for their students to do, to try to get them skilled up faster when they graduate in certificate programs. So I think it closes when you see the next big generation of students coming out of schools. This one may be lost, sadly. The next one coming out of schools where the training is improved and they come into the industry much more skilled. And then the other part is everyone in this room in their companies. You've got to do more to train those people. Yes, I know, I hear this a lot. I'm going to train them and they're going to leave. But that's true in every industry, and we're the only industry that backs away from it so specifically, right? Other industries understand that, but they still make training a basic requirement. And sooner or later, when everyone's doing it, the person coming in from the other company has got that skill set and moves along. My son's a controller in a big auto manufacturer on the finance side, and he just went to school, multi-$1,000 school for this whole BI training. And it's amazing stuff he does. And the company doesn't worry that he's going to leave, because in that class he was in were 7 other big auto companies, BI people getting trained in the finance side. So they know they're creating a standard, and that has to be a part of it. I think it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years to really fix the problem, though.
Okay, additional question. Do you see much difference in skills retention between training offered in person versus training offered online?
So we did a study. It hasn't been published yet. It's going to be published in Caltech University in Estonia, where we ran 4 colleges through that very thing. And we watched the retention, and we also watched the delta in improvement and learning in online training versus classroom training versus simulation training. Classroom training was better than pure CBT based watching a video or looking at PowerPoints or reading online. And simulation training was twice as good as classroom training in the results we saw. And I'm hoping to have that published out this summer. It's a big project and it's really cool learning data. As you can imagine, we have people on staff that are professional teachers and technology learners, because that's the other, there's 3 legs to this, right? There's the infrastructure and the speed and the ability to operate it. There's the content, and then there's the interactive learning with the user. And they take 3 different skills. And so we have a lot of professors in that environment. And as far as the charts for that report, when I publish it, I can't give it to you. I don't even have access to it. I've just seen it. When it's published by the school, I'll be able to share it with everyone. And I'm going to push it out quite widely because it's really interesting.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate you taking time for all the questions, and it was a great presentation. Gave us a good idea of what we should be looking for KPIs and metrics.
Excellent. It was my pleasure, and I thank you all very much for the time.
Thank you. So again, we would like to welcome new members and guests. If you're not a new member yet, why not? There's a lot of advantages to being an ISSA member, and specifically a North Texas ISSA member. If you have any questions, you can send an email to membership@northtexas.issa.org. That'll be Carrie, our membership director. To join is really pretty easy. You go to www.issa.org. Click Join Now, select New Members, and select North Texas as your chapter. And of course, if you are a member, refer a friend. There's a lot of good learning and a lot of good knowledge sharing going on through ISSA. If you're looking for a job, check out our LinkedIn webpage. And if you have a job opening, please talk to us, and you can get it posted on the LinkedIn page, as well as if you have a job opening, feel free to post that in the questions area, or raise your hand and Carrie can unmute you so you can describe what positions you have. Upcoming events, if you have any upcoming events that you would like to share with people, again, post that to the questions area and everybody can see those. The presentation today was recorded, is being recorded, and will be posted after the meeting, as well as the slides. So one of the things that Will brought up that we have selected as one of our initiatives this year is an outreach program to try and get more information out to the high schools and the colleges. And so you should have received an email talking about the outreach program. And if you haven't, you can go to this website, NTXISSA.org/outreach, and sign up. And we're looking for people that would like to go out and talk at the high schools and the colleges and share some information about information security. As Will mentioned, one of the biggest needs out there is for qualified people, and the sooner that we can get them into programs, the sooner that they can figure out what they really would like to do and what it takes to get that experience so they can get hired.
Bill, we have a note here from Marty who says we have 2 InfoSec opportunities at Right Staff. I'm going to unmute Marty so he can describe his opportunities.
Fantastic.
So hi, everybody. Thanks for taking a minute. We have one role that's in town. D is a professional services firm that is looking for a threat analyst. This is the contract who was in this job last, was there for 4 years. So we are looking for somebody who has 3 to 5 years of threat and vulnerability is non-products and technologies, log management, yes, etc.
Marty, your audio is a little distorted.
Understanding.
Marty,
your audio is a little distorted. Now?
Yes, that's better.
Can you guys hear me?
So if you'd want to post some more information about your position in the questions area,
okay.
And also you can post it on our LinkedIn page.
That's
fantastic. Thank you, Marty.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. We would like to have you fill out the survey about our meeting, what you liked, what you didn't like, how we can do better. From the
just
attendees.
A quick comment there, Bill. Andrea wanted to make a quick comment about our WSIG event. Andrea, you've been unmuted.
Now, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was typing fast. But we, Nancy Free and I are in the process of, is everybody hearing that background or is it just me?
There's a little bit of background noise, but not too much.
Okay. We actually are planning a WSIG happy hour, remote, virtual, with a great discussion topic. That will be the week of July 6th. We're looking at Tuesday, July 7th, and we'll send an invitation out next week.
Thank you, Andrea. We will be selecting winners from the attendees and sending out gift certificates. These are displayed here are the winners from the May Lunch and Learn. And now Nancy is going to host a Kahoots game for us. So if you
Bill,
don't
we have a question online here. Can you please show the survey URL again?
Sure. So if you'll go to kahoot.it or download Kahoot on your phone or tablet, Nancy will be giving you a PIN number that you need to enter, and we'll get started with that in just a minute. So here's the survey address, URL for the survey. All right, Nancy, if you want to take over, share your screen.
Nancy, I can't hear you.
Nancy, we can see you talking, but we don't hear you. Nancy, we still don't hear you.
Nope, we still can't hear you.
Is there a mute on your headset as well as
I have the same headset and it does that to me too. Let's, Nancy, if you want to just throw the questions up, I think we could just narrate along. All right, here we go. First question 1, security breaches have increased by what % since 2014?
So I think one of the things that Nancy had mentioned about these, this test is that the faster you answer, the more points you get.
There is no ticket number for the survey. It's going to be from the attendees like last time. All right, the average time to identify a breach in 2019 was 7 months. Awesome. Question 3, percentage of data breaches involving internal actors. All right, The answer is 34%. What percentage of data breaches involve healthcare organizations? %15%. Paul is in the lead, 1,851 points. Security services are expected to account for what percentage of cybersecurity budgets by the end of 2020?
So there are prizes for the top contestants on this game.
I think we're going to do 3 $50 Amazon gift cards. Next question, number 6, the average cost of a malware attack on a company is, well, these are all a lot of money, wow. $2.6 million. That's a lot of money. Oh, Paul is still in the lead. Awesome. Cyber attacks target small businesses X% of the time. 43%. There are X connected devices per 100 inhabitants in the US. Oh, wow. Only 25 connected devices per 100 inhabitants in the U.S.
I'm surprised by that one.
Number up. Yeah. Paul is still in the lead. More than blank % of organizations do not have a cybersecurity incident response plan. Oh, wow. That's scary. Nancy, thank you for all the hard work on these questions. And the answer is 54%. So we have a lot of work to do as practitioners.
Yep.
Awesome. Question 10, share prices fall blank % on average after a breach. Wow. %7.3%. That would make a breach a resume generating event for anybody. Wow. 6.2 billion files surveyed, including health/financial files. blank were completely open for global access. Well, that's scary. I hope this means internal global access and not on an S3 bucket. In an S3 bucket for the whole world? Oh no. Cyber insurance policies are predicted to cost from 14 billion in 2022 to blank billion in 2025. Oh, wow. $20 billion. That's interesting because I don't think it's anywhere near the cost of the data breaches to the hit on, I don't know, global GDP. Percentage of US businesses have not purchased any form of cyber liability or data breach coverage to date. Oh, I love these images. %68%.
Wow.
That's scary. We'll have to have Mark Langford come back and share some of his insurance research with us again this year. Question 14, 37% of malicious email attachment types are .doc. Hackers attack every blank second. Every 39 seconds. One person got it right. Oh, I totally thought it was 12 seconds.
Me too.
Wait, it was still Paul. Good job, Paul. Question 16, percentage of Americans don't know what steps to take in the event of a data breach.
I love that image.
Yes, someone's got an excellent library. 56%. Tasha in second place. Somebody's got to push Paul off the top. He can't sweep this. Question 17, percentage of organizations that believe the threats they're seeing cannot be blocked by the antivirus software. Oh, wow. %69%, only 3 people got it right. That is not a lot of faith in endpoint protection. Wow. All right. Question 18, average cybersecurity spending per employee is? $1,180. That shocks me.
Yeah.
Evidently, it shocked everybody taking the quiz. Awesome. Question 19, the U.S. ranks highest with blank percentage of all ransomware attacks. Only 18%. 61% of companies have over blank accounts with non-expiring passwords. Oh, wow. And 500 accounts with non-expiring passwords. So we need to clean that up with a mop. Wow. Paul's on fire. Wow. 53% of companies have over blank sensitive files open to every employee. Question 22, percentage of IT professionals that believe cybersecurity budgets are lacking. It's gotta be. Oh, it's only 60%. Wow. All right, Tasha's coming in second. Percentage of cybersecurity teams that are understaffed. 62%, so lower than I would have expected.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, Tasha's in the lead. Blank records are compromised every second. $55 records are compromised every second. All right.
Wow.
That's funny. All right. Tasha's still in first. Last question. Kahoot is fun. We should do this again sometime. Oh, it's a show question.
Thank you for putting this together for us, Nancy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right.
And Tasha took over as number 1, Paul's number 2,
Yeah.
and Elim as number 3. I pushed you out, Sean.
That's okay. I don't think I was eligible.
All right, that was fun. We'll have to do that again next month. So again, if you have any announcements you'd like to share with the group, please let us know. You can do that by posting it in the questions field, or raising your hand, and Carrie can unmute you.
Bill, Marty has posted her different offers into the answered questions. So please take a look there for the job opportunities that are available.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Carrie. So our meeting next month will again be on Zoom. It will be a joint meeting with InfraGard. And the good thing is, since it's going to be on Zoom, there will not be standing room only. You can be comfortably seated in your own chair, and unfortunately, you'll have to bring your own lunch. Thank you to everybody who participated. Check out Marty's postings in the question field. And if you have any other questions, please post them. Again, the recording and the slides will be posted later on this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Yes.
Bill, can I chime in? So
Sure.
we're having Brian Sanders from the Secret Service present on the Electronic Crimes Task Force next month with the joint meeting, and Cyber Reason is our sponsor. So it should be a very exciting topic. I've heard Brian speak in the past. He's excellent.
Thank you, Sean.
So one more. We have John Fox here with his hand up.
Okay.
John, you're unmuted if you have something to share.
No, I put in a joking question that says, is there a prize for the worst score on that last quiz? Because I think I had the worst score.
We'll have to send you to some training so you can work on getting that up.
I would love to do that.
Anything else? All right, y'all have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining and participating. Have a great day.